What up, what up, what up? It's your boys with the Fair Enough Podcast. I'm Luke. We got Micah and Hayden in the building, in a different building, but still inside of the building. How's it going, guys?
Good.
Oh, doing good. We always
Good.
come in at the same time, Hayden.
Impeccable timing.
It's that like Zoom feel. It's like, yep, no, okay.
I
But
see Micah's lips moving, so I just jump in.
yeah, no, I don't want to listen to him talk either. That's a good idea. But anyway, so it's been a couple weeks, kind of a little hiatus. We had some vacation stuff a few weeks ago, and then last week, somebody slept through our designated podcast time, and I will just say he's not wearing a hat right now, and it looks like you could almost put that lampshade over his head as a hat. That would be kind of sweet, but
It'd be nice to cover that up.
But anyways, yeah. So if you're watching on YouTube or something, we apologize for the glare. There's nothing we can do about it. All right, I didn't plan on crapping on Micah for this long, but here we are. We're going to talk some about the preseason games that we've missed. Reevaluate those battles that we talked about a couple weeks, where they're at, where we were right, where we kind of screwed up. So just going to kind of have a little more of a free flow, hopefully, today. Not really super organized out. So just going to kind of chat with each other and probably get a little heated by the end of it. There might be some stuff we disagree on. We usually are very nice to each other, but
Everybody's like, wait, the first ones you tried to organize?
boy,
That's fair.
that's fair. Fair enough. It's like that Family Guy skit where he's like, they said the name of it. All right. So first thing we're going to talk about is those QB battles that we talked about a couple weeks ago. I think most of them were pretty straightforward, so we'll kind of skip through the ones that we got right that were pretty easy to get right. The Raiders one, I think it was pretty obvious Gardner Minshew was going to beat out O'Connell. That ended up being ugly to watch. Like, I thought Minshew would kind of look better, but he didn't. Aiden O'Connell looked as bad as I expected him to, which is why I thought Gardner would win the job. But you guys see anything in, like, I guess what I should ask is there any hope for Raiders fans, like, at all?
Their defense.
They've got players. I mean, just not at the QB position.
That's not important. You're right. Okay. They'll probably be fine. QB is pretty basic, pretty easy to do. Doesn't matter how good they are.
Yeah.
Now, if you're a Raiders fan, you got to be a little terrified. I got some Raiders fans in my family, and I'll try to be nice to them this year because they're probably going to need it. But other than that, like I said, that was pretty expected. Obviously, the Vikings one sucks. We didn't get to see the QB battle. So McCarthy tore his meniscus, which doesn't usually require surgery. Part of me thinks that it was kind of in the plan to not have him play at least at the beginning of the year, and they didn't want to rush him back. So Darnold's going to get a full year outside of, injury, or if they want to play Nick Mullins. So he'd have to be really, really bad for that route to be taken. But then obviously Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. I look like an idiot, kind of, even though I said Russell would be the starter. I still don't think he should be. But Fields did not help my case by looking also really bad.
Boy.
I honestly think I might take Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell over those two from the way they looked in preseason. That was just ugly to watch.
Yeah, that was not great. I mean, Justin couldn't even hardly take the snap half the time. I don't know. I don't know which one's gonna be a bigger shit show, honestly. The Raiders or the Steelers. That is a toss up right now. It's both QB situations are just not great at all.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the Steelers also kind of in the same vein as the Raiders. They have a good defense. They have some players. They definitely don't have the weapons. I don't obviously the Steelers have Pickens, but I don't think Pickens is Devontae Adams. And I know everybody after Pickens is not as good as Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers. So they do have a little more hope in Las Vegas, but.
And they've got a little bit more of a foundation with the running game that the Raiders don't quite have as much. I mean, they've got Zamir White, but they've got two good backs there in Pittsburgh.
That is true, and Arthur Smith is going to run the football. But it's going to, we say they got 2 running backs. It's going to be Cordero Patterson. There's somebody else that like no one's heard of, and they're like, Najee's pretty good, but we're going to give Cordero 14 carries a game just for the fun of it, because they had Bijan last year, and they're like, Tyler Algier's our guy. Gosh, I hate Arthur Smith. Okay, that's a rant for a different day. But so you got the Steelers, you got the Raiders, Vikings. Unfortunately, kind of lost out, and then there's one team in the NFL that hasn't named their freaking starting quarterback. I hate Gerard Mayo already. Like, just going to go out on a limb from like a plain fantasy betting perspective. He's going to be a pain in the butt. I hate the guys that are like, oh, we have a competitive advantage by naming it tomorrow, which he's tried to come out and say. It's like, we haven't had the chance to talk to them. It's like, they have a full-time job in your building. What do you mean you haven't had a chance to talk to them? He's literally like 4 steps away from you as you're on the podium. All it is, hey, Drake, you're going to start. Hey, Jacoby, you're going to start. Okay, now I can go tell the media. So coaches that kind of play the games with the media, I do understand that like they don't want to talk to the media. Like, I get that. If I was in their shoes, I would probably hate that part of my job. But I can just tell from like a doing this perspective of fantasy, gambling, all of those aspects, you're going to get that information as late as you possibly can from the stuff that Gerard Mayo showed you so far. From what you guys have seen in the preseason so far, you guys have an inclination on which way that's leaning, or anything you've seen on what you think it should be?
I mean, I think that Drake May's played and gotten better each game. I think he looks good enough he could play, but honestly, I'm really torn between whether or not I want to see him play and start out the year, or if I'd rather have Jacoby out there getting beat up at first, because I think no matter who's in there, they're just going to get beat to death by opposing defenses. I mean, that offense is not very good. There's nowhere to throw the ball. I can't imagine they're going to have like this great running game. I mean, they're going to try to run the ball because, I mean, what else can they do to help their quarterback? They're going to have to, but I don't know that it'll amount to much. And honestly, part of me just thinks maybe sitting Drake May at least for 6 games or something like that will at least help him in the long run, just to not get hurt or to not be like, oh my gosh, do we need to bench him and hurt his self-esteem because, we're just playing so bad. Teams start hearing it from the media. They're like, you got to do something. And if benching him is the case, I don't think that helps him for your long run fantasy value wise. I think fantasy, you would do better in your leagues, like your dynasty leagues, if he could sit a little bit, not get battered back there, and maybe come in later in the season.
I mean, for my fantasy stocks, I kind of hope he plays right now because I need him in a couple leagues. But I think maybe sitting a little bit will help him. It depends where you think he's at in his development process. I mean, he got quite a few snaps in college. Yeah, probably wasn't he one of the higher ones in the draft with snaps. Him and Bo Nix, and so he's seen a lot of snaps. It just thinks if you think his snaps are going to what's the word I'm looking for? Transition to the NFL well, or if you think you need to wait and let him see a few, and then get a few NFL snaps towards the end of the year after things have cooled down and they kind of have things going as an offense a little bit better.
Yeah, just for to dial back on what you said, Daniels and Nix were the 2 at the top, and then May and Caleb kind of about 2-year starters. So not a little bit of snaps, but not like the Bo Nix almost literally a college football record amount of starts. So, and then Daniels had 4 years as a starter, either 4 or 5. I can't remember. I know he was a senior redshirt when he came out, but I can't remember if he had 2 medicals or 1 medical. Anyways,
mixing up him and Daniels then.
Yeah. I think the hard part with May, from my perspective, is I think it's hard to go look at the team and be like, we're going to play Jacoby Brissett right now. As good as Drake May look compared to Jacoby Brissett, 100% agree with both of you on the fact of like Drake May, it would be better for Drake May personally to not play. Their team is bad. Their line is bad. Health, everything. So it depends on if you're going to prioritize Drake May's development as a young coach, or if you just lose locker rooms so fast. I mean, you saw last year, like with the Raiders and McDaniels, of like they literally just didn't try. They go out one game, they don't try, and McDaniels gets fired. Same thing happened with Brandon Staley. Um, they played the Raiders, who were already a team that was like falling off, and they're like, yeah, we're going to play as bad as possible. So they finally get this guy out of the building. I think Gerard Mayo probably has a little bit of a leash, but it's probably not long, considering that he was just from the last regime. Uh, Kraft had been pretty loyal to Belichick, and it kind of bit him. So I imagine that he will probably not be as loyal to Mayo if it starts to go downhill. But I do think that from a coaching perspective, playing Jacoby for 8 games, and then if you can show something with May, kind of helps keep your job. So I could really see it going either way for him, for the team. Um, Also with Micah, I need him to play in a couple leagues. That would be nice. But I do think, as far as Hayden said, dynasty value, I think it only goes up the less games that he plays this year. So it's going to be interesting for sure. Like I said, I already don't like his like playing coy with the media. That's going to be a headache for everyone trying to bet and play fantasy, because you're going to get those things. And it doesn't help Kendrick Bourne out for 4 weeks too. I mean, that's probably their best receiver. No, that's not saying a whole lot, but Kendrick Bourne is a good NFL receiver as far as fantasy. Obviously, he has his shortcomings, but just a guy that gets open quite a bit. So that'll be pretty hard for them. I think that's all the QB battles that we really went into heavily on our last episode. I might be missing something. Like I said, we're not super organized, so all off the cuff might get me a little bit. But there were a couple things that we talked about. I do remember we talked about the Broncos running back job earlier in the year, and Samaje was one of them that we talked about getting cut. We were right. Chalk one up for us. But I've been talking all week, and I was like, I want him to go to Kansas City. The Chiefs only kept 2 running backs on their initial roster. I was like, we're probably going to bring in another guy. We did end up getting Samaje, so that was pretty exciting. You guys got any thoughts on how you think that backfield comes out now with Samaje coming to Kansas City?
Yeah, I don't know. It gets kind of difficult to figure out what they're going to do on the backside of it, I guess. I mean, with Samaje, he's probably going to be more of your passing back. I assume that Isaiah Pacheco is going to get those first 2 downs majority of the time. And then Samaje is going to probably be sprinkled in there with some other guys in passing situations, screen scenarios. But Isaiah also showed last year that he can do a lot of that too. So I don't know if they're just going to use him to spell him a little bit more. Like he might get a drive, and then Samaje might get a majority of a drive, and then Isaiah's back in there for the other snaps on that drive. I don't know how it's going to work out till I see that first game.
Yeah, and even with the Chiefs, I feel like even after that first game, you really don't know.
No.
I mean, throughout the year, it seems to change. They always seem to. They have your one guy. Pacheco's going to be that one guy, and then after that, they're going to mix in so much different stuff that it really depends. You're going to get lucky to pick which one out of that backfield.
Well, it's also a total Andy Reid move to just get a guy, and even if he doesn't use him very much, just have him there just in case of injury.
Oh yeah.
I mean, like if Pacheco were to get hurt, Samaje would be a good piece to have on that offense.
Yeah, I think when we're talking about gambling and fantasy, because that's what most of the people that listen to us are caring about, I think the only thing it does for Pacheco is kind of limits the ceiling of him being every single play. They're going to spell him a little bit more for health reasons. I mean, the Chiefs showed last year, like, they want to win regular season games. I'm not saying they're like throwing games or something, but they don't care as much about going undefeated or having the 1 seed. Like, they want to be healthy as possible when they go to the playoffs. So I think especially down the stretch, you could see a little more Carson Steele, a little more Samaje Perine to kind of keep Pacheco fresh for those playoff games. I think for football purposes, though, Samaje Perine is a great ad for Kansas City too. You talk about guys that make more of an impact than you see like in a stat line, and Samaje Perine is a great pass blocker. He's going to be in the right spot at all times, and so he might not get a ton of work as far as what you see on a line, but as far as being a little dump-off guy and pass blocking on third down, I think that's a great ad. So it will be interesting. I know Deneric Prince was everybody's kind of love, and I thought he looked pretty decent, but shows a lot from Carson Steele, man, to come in there and just completely unearth that role and be like, I'm going to be that guy. He was really good. I feel like he's a great like change of pace for Pacheco in the sense of like they're kind of the same pace, but he's just slower. Like they look like they both run really hard, and he's got a lot of energy. So that'll be a fun one in Kansas City, I think. And then obviously, as Chiefs fans, we'll kind of just stick there because the wide receiver room was pretty interesting as well. Obviously, we cut Kadarius Toney. Don't think there's going to be a lot of sad Chiefs fans in here, and that was really kind of expected. I do think the more interesting news side of the Chiefs receiver room is that we kept McCole Hardman and Sky Moore. I definitely thought one of those people would make the roster based on numbers and everything else. I don't really want to like totally crap on people in here. If it gets later in the season and things are still happening, maybe I'll change my tune on that. But obviously, I'm not a huge fan of McCole Hardman based on a lot of different statistics, mostly fumbles. I haven't done the math in the last like few months, but at one point last season, it was one fumble every 4 touches. That's a crazy number. That is not something that you want to have.
Not
So,
a great number.
I just feel like the things he does that are explosive are really good, obviously, and the Chiefs like familiarity. But were you guys kind of surprised that they kept both of those guys? I think more Chiefs fans really thought Sky Moore would be the guy cut over Hardman, but what do you guys think of that whole situation? And bringing Juju back, you can add that into.
I wasn't surprised that they kept those two just because we've seen more partial to Sky Moore for some reason. I don't know if it's just because we used the 2nd-round pick on him and we're still just hoping that he'll grow. But they're both, like, those 3 guys, Sky Moore, Hardman, and Toney were all, I mean, I just consider those guys mainly just gadget guys in Andy's offense. I mean, they honestly do all the same type of things. I was surprised, like you said, they're keeping both of them because they literally do each other's job. But I would say they're keeping Moore just because of where they drafted him. He's still young. They're just having that one last year of hope maybe before, it kind of is like that was your last chance really. And then Hardman, I mean, they clearly like him even though he fumbles it every 4 times like you said because he went to the Jets and then they traded to get him back. So, I mean, they clearly like him. I mean, he did have the game-winning touchdown. I mean, I know it was me and Micah and you could have all ran that route and probably scored that, but
I don't know. I'm getting pretty fat.
but I don't know. I mean, I don't mind it. I love the 3 main ones. Brown, Rasheed, Worthy. I actually really like Watson too. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of him, but I think he's reliable, and Mahomes clearly shows that he trusts him. And then Juju, I think, is kind of in that same boat. He's a guy who can step right into the offense because he knows it. Mahomes has trusted him in the past, and I think he'll be used sparingly enough that hopefully his knees will hold up for a full season. I mean, I don't think he's going to be asked to do like a ton of snap share.
Yeah, I was kind of expecting Hardman to get cut just because Sky Moore's a little bit younger and just we drafted him. We clearly saw something, and I think they still see something there. So you might as well give him more chance. And Hardman, when we signed Juju, I kind of saw him going, but so I'm kind of surprised he stayed, especially after we got Juju. But yeah,
I will say in Sky Moore's defense too, we drafted Sky Moore to be our 2 to 3 receiver, and then the first year, it's him and Juju as the 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Okay, like you're not taking a lot away. Like Juju played pretty well, but you're still facing a lot of looks that you probably didn't expect to go to as the Chiefs coaching. Like we expected more to be taken away from Sky Moore and him be kind of an outlet guy. Then last year, you have no one around him to take away the defensive. Like everyone's just kind of even. No one has to be game planned for in that receiver room. So I want to see him this year, like give him a chance where he's actually playing a role where he was kind of drafted to be in that, 3 spot, or he's probably below the 3 spot, but on the field, he'll probably be the third option in the wide receiver core. So it'll be nice to see him kind of have a chance to go against 3 and 4 corners as opposed to last year. He was still facing a lot of 1 and 2 corners. Mentally, that's pretty draining to have to be the guy when you weren't drafted to be the guy. And you don't, like, Sky Moore doesn't have the skill set to be the guy. He has the skill set to be a guy that can get open on 3rd down, to kind of be an outlet slot type player. So having him in his actual role that he was supposed to be in, where that's why I was kind of surprised on the McCole Hardman side. 'Cause it's like we've seen everything this guy can do at every level, and you know what it is. And so obviously the Chiefs appreciate that more than me. Hayden, I'm glad you pointed out Justin Watson in a positive light because I think he takes a lot of hate that he does not deserve. I feel like he's a very solid role player. Like he's just going to run a streak and out in a corner, and
He's good at that post.
if
man.
Mahomes gets in trouble, he's going to throw it to him. Like that's all
Another
there is to it.
person that surprised me honestly with those two was, I mean, everybody's been holding out hope the last couple of years on Justin Ross, and I think we finally got told. Everybody just kind of got figured out like he's just not going to end up being what he was at Clemson. Like whether you see those flashes or it's him, not knowing the plays when they're trying to run the offense, it's pretty clear that they don't trust him enough to be on the roster over a guy like Sky Moore or McCole Hardman that have clearly messed up enough times to get cut.
Yeah, at least to give you an opportunity to get on the field. Like they're not keeping you off the field by what they're doing. So, obviously we have our thoughts about whether they should still be getting opportunities. But if you can't beat those guys out for opportunities, you're obviously doing something in practice, in preseason, that the coaches are like, we cannot trust you at all. Now, he is still on the practice squad, so there's still going to be people out there that are still clinging on to that hope that he can become that guy. We also brought Remigio back, who I kind of wanted on the roster just from a special teams perspective. I don't know who's going to play that role. I wonder if that's going to be Sky Moore or Hardman. But based on the running backs we kept, I just imagine it's going to be Sky Moore or Hardman. I can't imagine that we're putting CEH back there. Or
I just hope I don't
unless
see
we're just
one of
playing
those
Pacheco.
guys on punt returns. That's what I just hope.
I imagine it's going to be either them or, unless they're going to put Worthy out there, which would be so fun to watch, but I doubt that they do that at his size. So
probably not Brown either.
Yeah, no, I imagine it's got to be one of those.
I mean, if you said that McCole Hardman's he fumbles once every 4 touches, I can't imagine what those do on every touch for punt returns.
Just 3 punt returns. That's all he gets.
I will double check that stat to see what number we're at, so we're not like throwing shade on him. That's false. But when I checked last, that's what it was. So okay, we'll move off the Chiefs. Obviously, they're going to be good. All of that stuff played itself out. We probably have stronger opinions on those guys because we had to watch them every week this year. Some other surprising cuts, in my opinion, we kind of touched on Samaje, but Tim Patrick for them too was a surprising cut. I kind of want to talk about some guys we're going to panic on, and Tim Patrick going to the Lions kind of brings that up. They signed Tim Patrick and Allen Robinson. I think you're hitting the panic button on Jameson Williams if you have him in fantasy leagues. Obviously, Amon-Ra is safe. Sam Laporta is safe. But they're bringing in 2 veteran guys, which shows me that they don't like the room they have around him right now. Josh Reynolds was there last year. He left for Denver. He was a guy that they really counted on in big situations. So I think they're trying to figure out another guy besides Amon-Ra they can go to. Jameson Williams has had some ups and downs. A lot of people still have him as like a fantasy sleeper, but how do you guys feel about, them bringing in 2 new faces? I know they don't run a role anything like Jameson Williams, but just that has to give you a little pause with them bringing in 2 veterans, right?
They need to mix something up. Other than Amon-Ra, they haven't had a lot to go around. They use Jameer in the passing game quite a bit, and he may be close to their second option passing-wise. So, you got to try to figure something out, get a little more options out there because Goff can still kind of throw the football. And, Amon-Ra's an animal. And so just giving him something to take away a little bit of aspects maybe and just try to throw something in there, maybe try something new, get a little more power to that offense.
Yeah, I agree. If they're picking up those 2 guys, I think it just spells out trouble for him if you have him and him ever panning out. He had a lot of upside and then just injuries, and then you'd always see like that practice video of him catching a ball and they'd be like, oh, watch out for him this year. And I just don't know if it's ever going to happen for whatever cause that is, whether he just can't stay healthy. if he's not learning the offense well enough, or he's just strictly not getting better than other guys. Because last year, I wouldn't say Josh Reynolds was a guy that you should pick up, um, maybe in your deeper leagues, but I thought for a second receiver to Amon-Ra, I thought he did pretty well, and he's just kind of bounced around. So it just kind of shows that that number 2 spot for them is pretty wide open, and if he couldn't really solidify that with how open that is, it just kind of spells out trouble.
Yeah, and I want to clarify, like, just going off of that and like what Hayden said. I don't think it's a death sentence. I just think it's a warning. So like, they could be the 3. Like Jameson Williams could still be the 2, and they're bringing in a guy because they do play a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. I think you might see a little more 2 tight end, 2 wide receiver sets with Laporta, and then some of their other guys. They're blocking tight ends, Zylstra, and I don't remember
Brock
the other
Wright.
guy's name. Brock Wright, yeah. I mean, guys that you're not like, they're not fantasy relevant, but they are good football players in the sense of they're good at blocking. They can kind of run routes, but they're in there more to block and kind of be a decoy. So, um, okay, that's the slide alarm. I think my panic level on this player is a little higher, and I know one of us in here really likes him. I think it might be both of you. Kyron Williams for me.
Yeah,
I
like
am on I am on heavy panic alert on Kyron Williams. Sean McVay is weird. Like that starts the whole conversation because I think any other coach I'd be like, okay, they just want to put a guy, play him as a punt returner, get a little extra juice. Like if Andy Reid was like, hey, we're going to play Pacheco a punt returner, I wouldn't be scared of Pacheco's role the same way I am because Sean McVay says Kyron's going to be a punt returner because that's how they benched all of their running backs was put him at some returner spot, and then all of a sudden the other guy's playing running back, taking all the carries. I will say Kyron did do that for a little bit last year, and it didn't hurt his offensive touches near as much. So maybe I'm freaking out over nothing. But the fact they drafted Blake Corum, they just signed Cody Schrader, the Mizzou boy, who I think if he's going to compete anywhere for touches, the Rams have shown like we just want somebody that's good at running the football. Like we don't need an elite athlete. We don't need this. We don't need that. If you can get to the hole, make yards. I mean, for example, Kyron Williams is not an athlete at all. Like he's one of the least athletic running backs that are playing in the National Football League and starting. But he's really good at running the football. So you brought in 2 guys that kind of fit that same mold, and now you're saying all of a sudden he's going to be a punt returner. So are you guys as terrified as me? Am I overreacting? Am I on the right path? Like, what do you guys think?
No, I think you're pretty on the right path. I drafted Blake Corum in almost every league I had Kyron in, just because when they drafted him, it made me think maybe there were some issues there. But they also did the same thing with Cam Akers. Cam Akers went out so fast, doing the same thing, and he was kind of supposed to be their lead back, and all of a sudden he was just gone. So it's just they seem to filter him in and out so quickly there, and so you just never know. But he was just so good last year; it's hard to think he doesn't have a role, but it just gives you a little scared there.
Yeah, I mean it's obviously a little alarming. I personally don't think that any of those guys that they
Aiden,
have are gonna.
go take that toy. I can't do it anymore. Sorry, Hayden's dog. I'm such an a-hole. Poor guy.
Look what you did.
All right, sorry about that.
Poor
Problems with having
doggo.
a tiny dog child. But back to what I was saying, I'm not alarmed just because I think a lot of the good running backs they have in that room are the same type, and I just don't see how they're gonna already pass him up. Now, if they start playing better than him in the games, I will start to get scared because Sean McVay has shown that he's just going to go to the guy with the hot hand. He's not a seniority type guy. He's not at that position, at least. He's not going to be like, well, Kyron, you ran for this many yards and touchdowns last year, but Blake had a 100-yard game, we'll just still give it to you. No, I mean, if Blake has a 100-yard game on 10 carries and looks way better, he's probably going to get more of the touches, start getting more of the touches. But until that happens, I'm not scared just because I think they're all the same, and Kyron has shown it. So I think Kyron's going to start out there, and he's he's just got to keep it going from what he did last year. And I think he will, just because they've got a good offense. I don't see how he couldn't excel in that offense. So I'm just going to believe that he's going to pick it right back up. I mean, if he stumbles and he doesn't do well, then it's going to be a little shaky because of how, like, black and blue Sean McVay can be with the running back room. I mean, he can be this one week and then totally off him for the rest of the year, and then he's gone.
Yeah, I think what scares me, I guess I should kind of speak on it a little so it's in like so people understand the thought process. If you have Kyren Williams on a dynasty roster, I still like having Kyren Williams on a dynasty roster. I still think he's going to be a running back 1 to at the worst high running back 2. Like if everything goes wrong for Kyren but he's healthy, he's going to be a high running back 2 at his very floor. I think where I'm more scared is taking him as the RB5, RB6 in a redraft league, which is where he's going right now. So I think you're betting on a guy being like he has to be top 3 for you to return value on a draft pick if you're drafting him as the RB5. And so I don't think people think about it like that very often, where it's like you're trying to get return on every single pick. If you pick a guy as the RB5, if he's not the RB at least 5, but you're really shooting for 3 to 1. So obviously when you're drafting the RB1, like you're just going to have, when you have those top 3 or 4 picks, like that's not the same conversation. But when you're talking about the second round, it's like, well, can I get, if we're looking at Kyren Williams, he's going around guys like Garrett Wilson, Drake London. In some drafts, you're going to have the RB4, RB6 conversation around him. So I think it's harder to take him in that round for me. Yeah, I just think it's harder to take him at ADP.
Like, to add to that, like I will say, like, I think it's just the fact that the reason you're seeing that and it's kind of scaring you away, which I get that. You got to hope for big upside there if you're drafting him there, but I think a lot of people are just because there's not much in your running back rooms as far as top tier talent. Like, I mean, you've got a lot of guys that fit in that RB2 scenario more than they fit in an RB1, and they're like, well, Brees, Bijan, and CMC are all gone. Now where am I at? Like, I got to get a running back because if I wait a half a round more or a round more, 2 or 3 more fall off there, and then you're drafting guys like Najee or guys like that who really, I mean, I guess they could be an RB1 if they have a great year, but they've been more along the lines of a higher RB2 to mid RB2. I think it just scares people because there's not as much saturation in that running back class as there is wide receivers. You can get a really decent wide receiver for you way down in the draft. And if you wait too long running back wise, you're kind of shit out of luck sometimes.
Gosh dang it, I pulled a mic. Okay, I was muted.
I was wondering.
So I think that's a really good point, is a lot of people are going to this hero RB strategy, which is knowing if you don't get one of those top 3 RBs this year, there's a big teardrop after, CMC, Bijan, Brees, where it's like then you're kind of picking. And I think that's where I kind of wanted to have this conversation about Kyren. It looks like he's already fell to RB7. He was in front of Gibbs. Now he's behind Gibbs just after the last couple days. But when we're having these conversations, it's like, do I take Kyren or do I take Travis Etienne? Well, for me with this news, he's behind Travis Etienne. There's no competition there. Do I take Kyren or do I take Derrick Henry? Again, I'm taking Derrick Henry. There's no competition there. Kyren or Isaiah Pacheco? Same conversation. Now you get it to Devon Achane, Josh Jacobs, which not Josh Jacobs. That's going to be a conversation we're going to have in just a couple minutes. But when you're getting to those guys where you do see pass, where even with disregarding health, because anyone can get hurt, I don't really count that unless you have a guy like, Hollywood Brown, who it's just like, I love him as a player, but he just always seems to be hurt. Unless you're in that conversation, I take injury out of the equation. So if you're talking about ways that they can be bad without being hurt, I think until you get to that Devon Achane, I'm just going to take those other guys and kind of pass on Kyren with all the news coming out.
Yeah, I agree. I just think it's so difficult because running back wise, I mean, if we're strictly talking fantasy, I mean, it's just so difficult because there's so many different scenarios. You've got your 3 bell cows, like you just said, Bijan, Brees, and CMC. after that, it gets so difficult because you've only got like a couple of guys who are the main guy, and then they've also got their reasons why you might worry just a little. Like Derrick Henry, he's the guy, but he's also 40 years old with 100,000 miles, no, 300,000 miles on that engine. Like,
Yeah,
I
no,
mean,
yeah.
I'm not saying that he ain't going to keep going because he's shown to be durable, and it's just crazy how much he can keep running at that age. But like, I just feel like those guys, you have questions like that. And then like you were talking about with Josh Jacobs, you get a little further down there in Devon Achane. Those guys have shown they can be studs, but then you've also got competition in the running back room, which I did see Josh Jacobs lost a little competition. So, but I'm sure a lot of people have drafted before actually seeing that. So some people probably
Yeah.
actually took him lower. I mean, if they would have seen that, I think he would have skyrocketed maybe a round or two higher than what he's probably been averaging.
Yeah, as of right now, if I had to, I think Josh Jacobs is a top 5 running back next year. Just everything that came out around them. Marshawn Lloyd's going to start the year hurt. A.J. Dillon's out for the year. I've been on Josh Jacobs heavy all offseason because I don't ever fall for the rookie running back hype when they come into a situation. Ow.
Micah.
Mike.
What are you talking about?
Mike.
Real bad.
Is it better now?
Yes. Okay.
Sorry.
For everyone that's going to be in their car and drive off the side of the road because of that. Good Lord.
And they put Taco Bell. They moved this to a hotel right next to a Taco Bell. It's not been great.
All you had to say right there.
We're
was
gonna have
Taco
to-
Bell.
We're going to have another episode of Micah Poops on this podcast too. But so anyways, as I was saying, Josh Jacobs for me, I've been heavy all offseason. Marshawn Lloyd, I felt was the draft to be the replacement for Josh Jacobs. Man, I still got some feedback over there. I don't know what you're doing, Micah, but can't focus. I got that ADHD and something goes wrong and I just lose my train of thought.
Go ahead. What were you saying? Josh Jacobs and Marshawn Lloyd?
Oh, I always felt like Marshawn Lloyd was drafted to be the replacement. We talked about this on the show where I was like, A.J. Dillon's the second running back. Marshawn Lloyd's there if something happens to Jacobs. Obviously now Marshawn Lloyd, when he gets healthy, is going to be the number 2 running back. If you are in a super deep dynasty, look at Emmanuel Wilson. Just a little teaser, little toss up there for you. I just picked him up in a couple of our leagues. The Packers have talked about how they like him all offseason. The A.J. Dillon thing was really weird. Go ahead.
It gets difficult because unless he was like, if A.J. Dillon wouldn't have got hurt, that would have been way more of a multi-head running back room than it is now. Like now Josh Jacobs is going to get all those snaps. So, I mean, his value is so much higher.
Yeah, and especially when you talk about Lloyd might be hurt to start the year, it's like Josh Jacobs is going to get 90% of the touches the first 4 games of the year, depending on when Lloyd comes back. And then obviously depending on how long it takes him to get fully healthy. Like you're not going to give an 80% Lloyd touches over Josh Jacobs if he's healthy. So you have to really look at those windows too. Like if you're in Dynasty or if you're in redraft, like if you're taking Jacobs, I think you should keep him all year. Obviously, I think he's going to be a top 5 running back. But if you're in Dynasty and you're not a competing team, man, you might ride Jacobs for 4 weeks and be like, okay, like this guy's showing he's going to be a league winner and deal him off.
For
like
some good stuff.
Yeah. And if you're competing, you should go get Josh Jacobs now. Like don't wait 4 weeks. Go trade for him now. Because in 4 weeks, he will be impossible to get without giving up a first, 2 firsts, something like that. Like I said, in best ball, I've been all on him. I think I have 65% draft share in Josh Jacobs. So,
Speaking of that, do either of you want Josh Jacobs?
He's like, hey,
in which league? Because I will deal.
I don't have many.
Oh, you can't say that and you don't even have him.
Boy, I got excited. I had to overpay so badly right now. I am all in.
Honestly, whoever picked him up thinking he's just going to be an RB2 is, if the rest of their roster's set, man, they're set up well. Because I mean, he's going to be a running back 1.
I wonder who got him in anonymous. That they probably did a really good job of paying attention to stuff and really dialed in to who they were going to pick up. So we're in an auction league right now, which I think we should go over at some point. We are definitely not far enough into it right now to talk about it, but we'll probably break down that roster just because I think that's one of the most fun ones that we do. Kind of explain how that goes. Right now, just for, in case Hayden wanted to go click on the button, Mike Evans is at 6 in that, but neither here nor there. Anyways,
Yeah, I'm trying to get people.
That's
to
too much money for Mike Evans. I can't do that.
Mike
only has $5 left, so he don't even care.
If they're watching right now, Micah don't got much money to spend. He's basically eating scraps.
Yeah, I guess
Happens
that
every
would be
year.
an
You know
interesting
what
thing to
happens
just.
every year? I take this big gold medal and wear it right here because I haven't lost.
That's true. Well, you did get Kyron Williams for 19, and you tried to bid me up on him, thinking I was going to take him. So,
Same with Tua.
I forgot you did that with Tua too. Yeah,
But
see, here's the thing, though.
I wanted
I'm not-
Kyron for 19.
Yeah, I'm not mad about Tua for 20 either. But here's a question. This is so random. This is so off. This is rambling. It's fine. You just did it with Jaden Daniels, and then told me you did it with Jaden Daniels, and then go and do it with Tua again right
But the
after
thing
that.
is- so the thing I was thinking with Jaden is I would take him for that.
Oh yeah, I don't disagree with that.
But I also probably didn't have the money to afford it. And then Tua, it was I will take him for that, and I already have Tyreek.
Okay, so you weren't actually mad about getting Tua the same way you were
No.
going to be about paying that for Jaden Daniels.
No.
Okay, all
Like,
right.
it could be worse. You could be Jay, and you could have like over $100 in just 2 quarterbacks spent. I don't think he's got more than 6 people on his roster right now,
He has,
and he's
8.
down to like $15.
Yeah, I mean his team's still pretty solid, but he's still got to pick up 3 starters, and he's got $17. Micah's still got to pick up 3 starters, but one of them's not a quarterback, so that should be a little bit easier. Anyways, that's a tangent for another day. Like I said, we'll go over that whole auction draft. That's something that's really fun that we do. It just takes so long, so long. But yeah, dialing back into the NFL. Is there anything else that like you guys saw from preseason news? Because I've talked about some kind of risers and fallers for fantasy that have really stuck out to me. And now that I got on that tangent about the dynasty, I kind of forgot who I was going to talk about next. So, anybody got any ideas?
While I was in the bathroom, did you hit on Deontay Ford? Or was it
Deontay.
Who?
It's not
Jerome Ford?
Jerome Ford. There we go.
Okay, Deontay Foreman and Jerome Ford
Deontay
were in
Foreman.
Cleveland.
That's what I
Okay.
didn't know. He was mixing 2 people there.
The whole backfield. Micah just was like, hey, if you can get both of these guys with one name, that's a big
What-
steal.
He
What
just
do you
adds all their
expect?
names together, and they're one player.
I'm dyslexic. What do you expect?
Deontay Ford Chubb. I have them all. They all
Well,
count
if
as
our-
the same points.
If our audience didn't know you're dyslexic, now they do.
You weren't even reading them. How does dyslexia play into this?
Mixes everything up.
Even in his head, when he's reading from his brain.
It scrambles words. Puts words where they shouldn't be. When they're on a list, it's all together.
Micah's brain is like a big giant Scrabble game.
Yep.
It's like a freaking waffle, man. He just pulls out different little cubes and he's like, oh crap, wrong one. Go back in that cube, this cube. Okay.
It's like he's trying to build the biggest word in Scrabble, and he's just trying to use all these letters, and they don't work.
All right. Anyways,
Sorry,
yes,
guys.
though, the Cleveland backfield is a good thing to talk about. So they cut Deontay Foreman. I think Jerome Ford is someone that you're really in a different way. I kind of talked about like the hot start for Jacobs. Jerome Ford, everyone's going to know Chubb's coming back. But you still can probably get a little bit more for Ford if he has a great hot start. Looking to kind of maybe somebody in your league that doesn't pay attention and doesn't realize that Chubb's going to come back soon. I mean, everybody has a couple people in their league that you have different levels of how much you're really looking into it and stuff. So, don't go to that guy that has been on the waiver all off season. Go to the guy that still has Deontay Foreman on their roster and be like, hey, I saw that Foreman got cut. Do you want, that's because Jerome Ford's going to be the guy all year. Do you want to take him? I mean, I'm not saying lie to people. You probably shouldn't, but
lie to people.
What are
It's
you gonna
fantasy.
do?
You got to do anything to win.
You do anything in this podcast to win.
Fair enough.
It's not technically cheating.
It's not. Just a little.
It is not cheating. That's true. Just make sure that it's like someone that you shouldn't be lying to. If you have that person in your league that you probably shouldn't lie to, don't lie to them. But
Fair.
Mhm.
There's some people
That running back room was tough to figure out, man. When I was doing all my draft, I mean, we're still doing the last one, but when I was doing all those, it was so tough to know whether to pick up Nick Chubb in one of those later rounds as a steal, or if Jerome Ford was going to, is he going to command more? Like, what's Nick Chubb even going to look like this year? Like, just because they have him on the PUP doesn't mean that he's going to come back after those 4 games and just, like, automatically start or even play. They may just be like, he's not close to ready. Jerome Ford's playing well. Like, I mean, like, it was just really tough because Nick Chubb's been so good besides the injury.
yeah, I mean, Nick Chubb has been one of the best running backs of all time statistically. When you look at everything, it's him and Jamal Charles are in a category up here by themselves, and then everyone else is normal.
You basically had to guess what you were going to get.
Yeah.
What you're gonna get this
The thing for that backfield for me was I screwed up in our guillotine league. I took Deontay Foreman, thinking he was the backup because that's kind of what I had heard, and then all of a sudden Pierre Strong's the backup. So I put in a waiver claim today. We'll see if I can get that through. But to drop Deontay Foreman, no, Pierre Strong's drafted, but I picked up somebody else. That's my point. Anyways, so yeah, I mean it's really easy to guess wrong, but I think that's something that I've really done this offseason is really pay attention to news and react to it quickly. I mean, if you look at our offseason dynasty transactions, I think I have like 75% of them, to be honest. And it looks really dumb when you look at the thing because it's like, oh, Luke picked up this guy and then dropped the same guy 2 weeks later. But it's like you have a couple spots on your roster that you can play with, and it's worth taking the risks to add those people. For example, one of the guys that I added was De'Ami Brown, and I was like, oh, this probably won't amount to anything. Jahan Dotson gets traded. It's like all of a sudden you kind of have something that could have value. So just those little taking the time to kind of pay attention to news and then react to it quicker than your league mates, that's definitely something that can make a difference in leagues. Obviously, De'Ami Brown's not going to win me the league. But let's say I get a second-round pick out of De'Ami Brown because he takes off this year, and then I get a guy that could – really play, or De'Ami Brown does become somebody that can be my third wide receiver. Like those are all options that are possible. So make sure you're paying attention to that news and trying to do stuff with it quickly because you will have people in competitive leagues that if you don't do it quickly, somebody else will do it.
Before we move on from that Jahan Dotson thing, that was frustrating, honestly, just to see him go to the Eagles in a way. Just because if you drafted either one of their 2 receivers, Devontae Smith or A.J. Brown, I just automatically assumed with how much upside Dotson has that that's going to do nothing but at least hurt their value a little bit. Now, I don't know how much. I mean, he hasn't done a ton for the Commanders, but we'll see. I mean, everybody's talked about how much upside he has and how much they liked him. Will he flourish in Philly?
So I don't think it impacts A.J. Brown. I think A.J. Brown is different, and he will get the targets he's going to get. Devontae Smith is a little closer. Like, let's say if I had rankings, I might move him down a spot or 2. I don't think it like really big affects him, but it is something to keep in mind. The thing that I take from that is they're going to give Jalen Hurts every opportunity to succeed. Like getting him Jahan Dotson on top of what they already have in that room, they obviously are investing in him, wanting him to be a better passer. That I think that also shows they're probably going to be throwing the ball a little bit more than we might have wanted to think with Saquon coming in, because you don't bring in Jahan Dotson to run the football more. If you think that you're going to be a running team, you really probably don't make that trade, considering you already have 2. I mean, at least one elite receiver. I think Devontae Smith's pretty close to as far as a football player, an elite receiver, but he's at least really good. So definitely bringing in that third guy is indicative of what they want to do offensively. I also think that means the Commanders are really confusing to me. If we're talking about fantasy movers, I guess too, another big one for me would be Terry McLaurin with that news, because there is now no one else that has at least name value. You know, there's some players like De'Ami Brown, Luke McCaffrey, Zacchaeus, who could be decent football players. But for fantasy, you gave him the toy back? You're such
Well,
a
she
sucker.
keeps running back and forth. She can't decide what room she wants to be in.
But yeah, so anyways, Terry McLaurin, someone for me that kind of moved up with all the news that we had today too, or yesterday, whatever day that was.
Yeah, I love seeing that for him because maybe he can finally jump up there and just be that for sure. Hold on one sec.
Micah, take it away. Sorry. It seems like I hate Hayden's dog. I don't. That noise is. Mike, are you muted? Or are you just waiting for me to shut up?
I'm muted. Sorry. I don't have much to say about Dotson. I mean, him moving there is, like you said, you guys kind of covered that all. But
yeah,
you
I know
bet
Hayden
Hayden-
had something to say.
yeah, so I was going to wait on him probably to say what he's going
Sorry.
to say about
I was just
Dotson.
gonna say that I like that from McLaurin because I think he's finally going to be able to be maybe like a top 15, maybe even top 10 type guy because he's the guy for Jaden Daniels. I mean, if Jaden's able to throw the ball well and stay healthy, I think he could be a stud this year. So we'll just see. That's all I had to say on that one.
And one more thing on McLaurin too, kind of a little bit in the weeds of the football aspect, but DeAndre Hopkins was with Kyler his rookie year, and he played the left receiver. That's all he did, and he only ran like 3 routes, and everyone's like, this can't be fantasy relevant. And DeAndre Hopkins, Kyler's rookie year, was phenomenal because he just had so many catches, so many. I mean, he's only running like slant screens and all that in Cliff's offense because it's like within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage is the only place they want to throw the ball. Really frustrating to watch sometimes, but I think Terry McLaurin will have a ton of targets, a ton of catches. So definitely somebody like if you're with somebody that they're like, oh, I don't think the Commanders are going to be good because you can make storylines about all this stuff. Jaden Daniels is a rookie. A lot of people hate rookie quarterbacks to have their wide receivers. So Terry McLaurin, somebody you could be targeting. I'm kind of just going to go on a little tangent here because there's a couple guys that have really moved up my board in the last couple weeks. Calvin Ridley's one of them too, especially with the DeAndre Hopkins injury stuff. I think Calvin Ridley is somebody you should target in Dynasty or if you're in a redraft, really be maybe even reaching a little bit to get him. I know that Will Levis scares a lot of people, but I actually think Will Levis looked really, really good in that system in the preseason. I think Callahan's a great offensive coach. Like I've said 100 times on the show, only offensive line coach I'll ever reference is Bill Callahan. Tennessee's offensive line actually looked pretty decent. I know they were playing backups, so it's kind of hard to gauge that. But offensive line is one where if you're not in camaraderie, it still looks bad, even if you are playing lesser talent. So I think Tennessee's a team to kind of watch as far as offense and really kind of getting a couple of the pieces there. And Pollard's the guy. That's also something from Tennessee.
I agree there. Another guy for them that I would say, because Calvin Ridley may have been high enough up that somebody might have stashed him away, but somebody you might be able to pick up on your waivers depending on how deep your league is, Tyler Boyd for them. I mean, if DeAndre Hopkins is hurt, I think Tyler Boyd could be a pretty good guy as far as targets go because with Joe Burrow, when Joe Burrow was playing, Tyler Boyd would have games where, I mean, he would be the focal point of the offense. And I still think he can do that. And with him not having to be the third option on this team, if DeAndre Hopkins is hurt, he becomes the 2. I think that bodes well for him. Obviously, when Hopkins comes back, I think he goes back into more of that very hit or miss role that he was in with the Bengals. But for now, I think he could be a pretty solid 2.
Yeah, and I also Tyler Boyd. We're on the same page there. For me, it's more of a best ball. I don't leave a best ball draft without Calvin Ridley or Tyler Boyd. So if Ridley doesn't fall in the right spot for me, I just take Tyler Boyd at the end because he's almost always undrafted. But and then I think DeAndre Hopkins too is playable. Like health is a concern, but like I do think that team's going to throw the ball 40 to about 40 times a game. So Tennessee's an offense, especially with the receivers, and then Will Levis as a dynasty QB2 or a best ball QB2 or 3 that I'm interested in investing in.
Yeah, I'd love to see what Okonkwo could do.
Yeah,
what I was going to say actually relates
to this pick.
Go ahead, Mike. I agree.
What I was actually going to say actually relates more to the McLaurin and the Dotson thing that I thought. Noah Brown got cut from the Texans, and the Commanders picked him up, and he had spurts last year where he was pretty good after Tank Dell got hurt. So he might be just a guy to look out for to see. But
yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, for sure. And he's very solid. Like I don't think he's gonna. That could be more of a hurt for the Luke McCaffreys, the De'Ami Browns, than it is a knock on McLaurin. But it's hard too because like as a Chiefs fan, this is what I come back to a lot of times. Like we signed Juju. I like Juju. I think he's solid. But then you have like. You can't tell me Noah Brown wouldn't be the 4th or 5th best guy on the Chiefs roster. Like he would make the team, he'd be good, and it's hard to watch guys like that. I know they might not want to sign with the Chiefs, but it doesn't feel like we ever like put out feelers or try to sign those kind of guys. So I do think Noah Brown's he's a better NFL receiver than a fantasy receiver. So I don't know that he's somebody that if you can get him on waivers or something, like definitely go pick him up. But I think he's more valuable for a football team.
He's like that guy that's going to get you. He's like that guy
pickup.
That's going to get you 30 points one game because he just has like one catch that's like 65 yards for a TD, or the other game he might have 3 catches for 30 yards.
What scoring format is that? 30 points. What are you playing?
I just mean like along with other. He's going to have other catches too. I just mean you get one catch for 65 yards on a TD. Heck, you're already almost halfway there.
Yeah, no, I agree. I do think Jaden Daniels gets a bump because of him coming in. I think that's the way you got to look at a lot of these news is like they bring in a good football player. Okay, yes, it's relevant for that, but what's most relevant is the QB around him. Okay, that means the running backs have more space to work with. Like look around the person that's actually involved in the news. For example, if you're talking about the Chiefs, like Samaje Perine, I don't think he's a big fantasy asset, but I do think that adds value to Mahomes in the fact of pass blocking and throwing. So things like that where it's like they bring in a new receiver, they bring in a new left tackle. It's like, okay. For another example of this is the Trent Williams stuff. If Trent Williams is not playing for the 49ers, I know that I've crapped on Brock Purdy a lot, but whatever in I would have been beforehand, I am 100% out. No Ayuk, possibly. No Trent Williams, possibly. I guess we did say we were going to talk about the receivers. We can kind of close out with that with the big contract debates. We'll start with Ayuk because we're already right here. But in my opinion, I think Brandon Ayuk still plays for the 49ers. I don't really see anything going awry with that this far into the offseason. I know Pittsburgh's got an offer on the table that the 49ers can just take whenever they want. But in my opinion, Trent Williams is not going to play with that new contract. This is the news that came out. You cannot lose Ayuk and Trent Williams. So which one of those two are you going to pay? Well, one of them's 40 years old. And I know Hayden was sarcastic with Henry being 40. I think Trent Williams is actually 38 or 39. So quite literally basically 40. And then I just feel like he's the best left tackle. So 49ers definitely have a decision there. I don't think they can afford to pay both of them going forward. So maybe Ayuk is a Steeler. Once again, I don't think Ayuk really moves one way or the other because he's in a better offense in San Francisco, worse offense in Pittsburgh, but he's the one where he's the 2 or 3 option in San Francisco. So I think it's kind of a wash for him. The people I do look at, if Ayuk gets traded, Debo obviously moves up. Kittle obviously moves up too because Kittle last year when one of the two was missing, Ayuk or Samuel, was phenomenal. So if you think Ayuk's going to move, I'd be drafting George Kittle in your redraft leagues for sure.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I don't think he really has any chance to go to Pittsburgh because I don't think like just the way he's been acting has been so weird. Like it's such a weird scenario where he's not like the top guy who's waiting to get paid and they're just dragging their feet like how the guy we will talk about, CeeDee Lamb, did. Like CeeDee Lamb deserves that kind of money that he's wanting. Cowboys just dragged their feet. With him, I mean, they're not going to pay him that. He's probably going to play for him because he also wanted to get traded, but the teams that were dealing with him, he didn't want to go to, or they didn't want to accept the offer that was on the table for him because it most likely isn't good enough value that they would like to get rid of him, and they know that he'll play. Like, I mean, like he's not going to sit out the whole season. Like, it's not what's going to happen. And if it worse comes to worse, he's just gone after the year. Um, so I would imagine he'll play, probably reluctantly. But I think, like you said, if he is gone, it only ups the people's value on the offense because that's more targets to them. Um, and wherever he goes, he'll be viable. But if he goes to Pittsburgh, I do think his value goes way down. He comes way down in that running back two, or not running back, wide receiver 2 room.
Yeah. The hard part is Steelers, their just quarterback play isn't going to be good this year. And so it's hard to say he's going to be up there. I mean, Luke will say that the 49ers quarterback room isn't very good either, but that it's made up for in scheme. So,
I also
Damn,
will say
that's a hot take.
with all the issues I have with the 49ers room and Brock Purdy, I would take 17 quarterbacks between Russell Wilson and Brock Purdy. So, I mean, if I have Brock Purdy at 25, I have Russell Wilson at 74. Like, I would play backups before I would play that man. Jared Stidham, I'd call him. Okay, I can't think of very Carson Wentz, call him. I mean, Russell Wilson to me is a dying asset. And I think Fields didn't show enough to take the job away from him. So I do think that's who will be playing at some point. Ayuk, though, going back to the contract thing, is really weird because when you watch Ayuk play, as far as a receiver, he's so good. Like, he might be, like, there are people that will go on Twitter and, like, football guys that will be like, he's one of the top 3 wide receivers in the NFL and show his routes and show everything and kind of break him down. And I see all of that. It's just hard when it doesn't translate to production like that for the 49ers to justify a contract. And I know part of that is scheme and the way that they play him, but in my opinion, I'm with you. I don't think he should be in that top 5 receiver contract lane, and that seems to be what he's asking for. Obviously, teams and players lie when it comes to those negotiations on what's happening in the room for sure. So maybe he's only asking for 26 and the 49ers just don't want to give him that. I don't know. Obviously, I'm not there. But I don't think you can give him the $35 million similar to what CD got and feel comfortable with that, especially knowing that you have to pay Trent Williams. You have to pay, unless you're going to let Debo walk, you're going to let Kittle walk, or some of their defensive players that are coming up for contracts. And that doesn't even factor in the fact that if you like Brock Purdy, the way that the 49ers talk about him, like he has a quarterback contract coming up that's not going to be small. So you really have to think about whether you want Ayuk over some of those other guys. And I think that's where the conversation's hard for them because if, for example, Pittsburgh, who wants to trade for him, it's like they don't have anybody else to really pay. They don't have talent on the roster to, kind of divvy up that stuff. So
It's kind of similar to Dallas, and not in the aspect of they have so many weapons on offense. Like CD's kind of that guy for them, but it is similar in the aspect of they have so many people that they're getting ready to pay, and they chose to pay CD the bag. They've also got to pay Dak if they want to keep Dak. They've got to pay Micah Parsons. 49ers are I would say, and I think all of us would agree, they're a better, well-run organization than the Cowboys are right now, just because of who's in their GM spot. But I would say that the 49ers are trying to avoid paying the wrong guy too much money so that they can't keep the guys that they actually really need. Like you said,
yeah,
Trent Williams. They're going to probably pay Brock Purdy. Honestly, if Brock keeps getting them to at least the NFC Championship games, I don't see where they just say, nah, we don't like getting there. We'd rather take our chances with somebody else, like a Trey Lance, who we thought was going to be good, and completely
Yeah,
blew ass. Like, I would
damn,
imagine they're going to pay
it's
him. They may
cold.
not pay him like they may not pay him like Joe Burrow money when Joe needed a new contract, but they're going to pay him a lot. And then the other people whose contracts are going to be coming up, like I can't even think of other guys that would need it. But maybe some guys need restructured or extended. Bosa's, CMC's. I can't think of what their
Yeah.
contracts are right now, but they're going to have a lot of money. But I think they're trying to run it better than what the Cowboys are. The Cowboys are just like, well, let's pay this guy a lot of money, and then we'll see how much we have next year for this guy. And then, I don't think they think very far in advance.
Well, the 49ers, they just gave Bosa his. I think CMC's probably on his last big deal, honestly. I don't know that he'll get another one, but I think the Brock Purdy one's probably the one where they're having that internal debate of like, if we give Brandon Ayuk this contract, if we give Trent Williams an extension, which Trent Williams would probably be like 1 year, so maybe that doesn't factor into the Brock Purdy conversation. But I mean, Samuel has 2 years left. Kittle, I don't know his exact contract, but I think he can probably only have 2 or 3 years left. So they're going to run into all these running out at the same time, and they're so good at drafting talent too. So I'm sure that they have guys on their roster that right now we're like they're a pretty decent player that in 2 years are coming up for those big contracts
to
because
pay
they're
him.
just going to be studs. Yes. So I think that factored in with the fact that if you're good at drafting talent, you also can just facilitate guys out. And, they just brought in Terrence Marshall Jr. from the Panthers, who was a highly regarded draft pick. It's like, okay, do they think that we can see something there? They just drafted Ricky Pearsall in the first round. Do they think they have something there? And so it's just those little battles that they're playing. We'll move on to the Cowboys because I think that one brings up a very interesting debate. Like you said, of you have Parsons, you have Bland, you have Lamb, who did just get paid, and then you obviously have Dak. Parsons and Dak, and maybe Bland even too, because statistically he had a really good year. Now I don't think he's in that elite corner debate, but he does, and some people do think he's there because of his picks and the plays that he makes. So I think like you have a very interesting conversation there of like, are you going to take Parsons or are you going to take Dak? Because you can't pay them both. You can't give Parsons $40 million like the Aaron Donald type contract, and give Dak 60 and give Darren Bland 30, like on top of giving
Yeah.
CD 32, 34. So like it's hard to do that, and GMs have a very hard job. That's why they get a lot of money to do what they do. I don't feel bad for them, especially in Dallas's case where the GM is de facto Jerry Jones and his son. But
Yeah.
they definitely, they paid CD, and I think that was the move. Like, I think CD would have sat out a game, and he would have gotten $4 million more on that contract because their offense would have looked so bad. They would have been like, kind of like Chris Jones with the Chiefs last year, where he sat out a game, and they were like, okay, yeah, we need to go pay that guy because we don't look very good without him. So let's make it happen. But I think it would have been similar to that situation. So here's the question. I think $50 million, we all probably signed Dak because that's like the Baker Mayfield, or not the Baker Mayfield range, but that's just above the Daniel Jones range with the salary cap only going up. Like $50 million is doable. The number Dak wants is 55 or 60. Do you guys do that, or do you go and you draft somebody? Because it's like, I guess the question is really, when you were a Chiefs fan and we had Alex Smith, that's what Dak Prescott is. You're going to be relevant. You're going to be really good, but he's not going to elevate your team to that next step without having all the pieces around him. And the more money you pay, the less pieces you have around him. So do you think Dak is a guy that you could still see elevating, or do you think Dak is a guy that needs the pieces around him?
Oh yeah, a lot of that's situational too, because like with Alex, we had Patrick and we saw what Patrick was at that last game. We had heard all the stuff throughout the year of what he looks like in practice. So we were fine with not paying him, like not keeping him. We knew what we had coming up. But with Dak, they don't really have that guy. Like, and it's pretty well known, and I think it's pretty well known in their organization that they don't have that guy behind them. Like they picked up Trey Lance, just I don't know why, but they did. Um, he's obviously not going to be the dude. I don't even remember who else their other quarterback is. I think he's actually the better of the two.
Cooper Rush will be the backup, yes.
But he's clearly, obviously, not somebody you want to try going forward
No.
with the organization. So, like, it's just when you don't have somebody, you want to stay relevant. Like, that's probably one of the main things for a team. And I know they don't visibly, tell that to people. They don't just say, hey, well, we're just trying to stay relevant. We don't want to fall into the category of like the Panthers or like teams you just don't talk about because they suck so bad. So I would imagine they'll probably pay him. And if it comes to the fact of getting rid of Micah Parsons so they can do that, I think that's what will happen because I think they would rather stay in that 9 to 12 win range. And I think they stay in that with Dak. I think he is a really good regular season quarterback. He's just got to obviously figure out things in the postseason. But we can still say that same thing about Lamar. Like, they're not going to move on from Lamar because he's had postseason troubles. You're just going to hope he gets better and eventually he breaks through. I think they're going to sign him. They're going to hope eventually they can build a team around him that can break through. I mean, I just think that's how it goes. If you have a quarterback that shows he can be pretty good and you don't have anything behind him that can be better or promising, then you're going to sign him.
Yeah, I think you almost have to sign him just because you have nothing back there. But I do think they need to somehow acquire a draft pick to go get somebody, if that makes sense. Like, you got to, because you're not going to keep CeeDee Lamb happy. You're not going to keep, I guess that's the only person they really have. But, I mean, it's hard to justify signing CeeDee Lamb to all this money if you're not going to have somebody to get him the ball.
Well, it's also tough because, like, if they're going to go get a draft pick, then you're not signing Dak. So then you're probably going with one of your backups or signing a different backup. And you've also got to get up there far enough you can get a guy that can either play in the first year or you get somebody good enough to play for 5 games and then you play him.
So, yeah, I guess that would be like my scenario I would throw at you of the Vikings. They didn't pay Kirk Cousins. They went and signed Sam Darnold, and they drafted J.J. McCarthy.
That would be the route they would have to go, yeah.
Yeah.
Would you rather do that or sign Dak Prescott? That's my question.
What do you have to give up to get those draft picks? So that's probably big.
Let's say that
they're not
the
going to be
49
bad enough. They're not going to be.
Let's say that the Dallas is at 18. That seems reasonable. Made the playoffs, lost in the first couple of rounds.
Give up their next first round?
2 firsts, 18, and their next year's first to get up to 8. Take Quinn Ewers. I think Quinn Ewers will be earlier than that, but let's just say that. So they sign who's going to be a free agent? Justin Fields, and they draft Quinn Ewers.
You
do that. Would you do that or sign Dak for $55, $60 million? You're the GM.
I'm going the different route just because I think you can see early on whether guys are going to be able to have some success in the playoffs, and I think Dak has shown me enough times that he's not going to be able to break over that big milestone of winning the Super Bowl, which is all that truly matters. Like, I know that they love being able to get to the playoffs every year, but I think in my scenario, if I was running the team, I would do I would go try and get a guy who I think can get us over the top, win a Super Bowl. I think obviously what they're going to do is sign Dak because I think Jerry's thinking, I don't have all the time in the world to just be playing like let's go back into rebuild mode and let's try out a new QB or a new coach. Like, I don't think he's got all that time that he wants to spend doing that, which is why I think he's trying to keep the team he's got intact and build what he can around it.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting from the Jerry Jones perspective of he loves making money. Jerry Jones is so good at making money. He's phenomenal. He's the best owner in the league at making money. Is he at the age now where he's like, I need a Super Bowl to feel fulfilled, or is the money still good enough? And I really think that's the Dak Prescott question of do I really try to go in for a Super Bowl, get a new guy, or am I just going to make money till the end of my days? Because, Jerry Jones is really old.
He could completely miss. Like, what if Quinn Ewers comes in and Quinn Ewers is just as bad as Trey Lance? Then it's like, okay, I have no shot at getting a Super Bowl.
But if he's as bad as Trey Lance, you're going to have a number 1 overall pick, and maybe you do, again, have a shot at getting the Super Bowl.
Well,
but
guess that's true.
I think that with Dak, if he does the same thing this year, which if he at the end of the year is balling out in the playoffs, they go to the NFC Championship game, they go to the Super Bowl, obviously this conversation's over. Like, they just signed Dak. But if Dak goes to the wild card game and plays really bad again, I think that you're also not going to win a Super Bowl with Dak. I think the conversation's pretty ended at that point.
He's had opportunities, though, I will say, where he hasn't played great, but like when they played the 49ers, I'm pretty for sure if I remember right, he played he didn't play great, but like their team got closer to winning those games than what his performance actually showed. So I wonder if they're not just like, hey, can we get a few things to fall our way?
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of, I mean, I know it's not all luck, but sometimes it is. Like, I mean, sometimes you got to hope that maybe the best team in the league on your side, their quarterback, like if Brock Purdy were to get hurt on that side and Jalen doesn't have a great year, then you're looking at it like, man, we could really get to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I think that's where like you just evaluate this year. Because I think the problem with Dak is if you give him 60, Dak's got to be the best quarterback on the field. Like there can't be any conversation about it. He has, for example, Mahomes and Purdy, when they played last year in the Super Bowl, I think it's pretty obvious to everyone the 49ers, top to bottom, have a better roster than pretty much anyone in the NFL. So you need your quarterback to be the guy that takes your team to the next level, which is what Mahomes did. That's why they won. If you're paying Dak $60 million, that's what you have to have. You can't have mediocre quarterback play because you can't build the roster around them to overcome that. I think we'll stop that one there because we still got to talk about Ja'Marr Chase, which I think is the most interesting one out of all of them because he's the one that hasn't gotten paid yet, and we're already at an hour and 20 minutes. We're going to go kind of quick. But do you guys see Ja'Marr Chase getting paid?
I said good because my laptop's at 2%. So
go ahead.
All right,
Micah.
so
Do you think
if Micah goes
paid?
AWOL,
what was the question?
Do you think Ja'Marr Chase gets paid?
I think he has to. I mean,
Are we talking this year or just in general?
this year, I know he gets paid after this season. Yeah.
I don't think they pay him this year. I think they should to keep him happy, or maybe to even kind of beat the next wave of contracts getting signed. I think you might want to, but I think they're probably going to wait a year, free up a little space. Does T. Higgins have a decent contract?
Nope, he's gone after this year probably.
But
They
I'm
tagged him
saying,
this year.
I'm saying, will that free up more room this year?
No,
Next
they
year
tagged
for
him.
Okay. But I think next year is probably when he's going to sign. But I would go ahead and do it this year. That way you don't have to try to beat the next wave of contracts jumping up. But that's what I would do. But I think they'll probably wait until next year.
I don't think it benefits him at all to really wait. I mean, if he's a guy that you know you're going to pay and you're going to keep, I don't know why teams do this and they wait because your price only goes up every time. I mean, like
That part.
I don't even know how it probably went with CD, but CD might have been like, we're getting pretty close to the season. I think I'm going to ask for another $1 million, or I'm going to ask for another couple million, just because like you guys are going to realize in that first game you really need me. Or say he sits the first game and he's like, I was wanting 145, but now I think I want 150. Like it doesn't benefit you with guys you're going to sign. I don't get it. Like, I mean, like for us with Tyreek, I think it was kind of like we could sign him. Can we make this work? So we were trying to get him to take a little less than what he probably could have gotten. And then we were just kind of like, nah, we really don't have to have you. I mean, we proved that. We didn't really have to have him. I mean, at the time, we were kind of like, oh, crap. But I think that's with them. I would assume they want to keep him, so I don't know why they would wait. Like Micah said, it's only going to go up if they wait till next year and say more receivers start getting signed. I don't even know who would be up for it next year, but I'm sure there's some that are going to be getting higher than what Jefferson got, higher than what CD got, just because the cap's going to go up. And every time somebody resets the market, even with quarterbacks, I mean, it just keeps jumping. So you might as well sign them early.
Yeah, and even if it's not somebody relevant who signs next year, say it's somebody who's not relevant at all but signs just below Dak and CD, I mean, he's going to be like, look, they signed for that.
Yeah, he's going to be
And
like,
Yeah.
I want a lot more.
You're probably talking about like Drake London, Chris Olave.
Yeah.
Those are the guys.
Yeah.
So if they sign that CD deal, because the thing is about the cap, it keeps going up. it's just going to continue to shoot up and up and up.
Mhm.
And agents aren't playing numbers; they're playing percentages. So they're like, "Hey, yes, this is more expensive than the CD deal, but it's a lower percentage of the cap because the cap went up $30 million. So it's like you're giving up less of your allotted money for this guy." I think for me, my decision with Chase would be if he's between CD and Justin Jefferson and he wants to be here, I pay him that. If he wants to be above Justin Jefferson, I tell him to kick rocks and I don't sign him. I tell him to go and test the market and see if anybody's going to give him more than Justin Jefferson got, and I don't think anybody would do that. Um,
I
just
hope
because of
that's
his
the
health,
scenario.
just because of his health history more than anything. Like I don't think it's a talent problem. I think it's like, am I going to pay a guy more than Justin Jefferson to play 12 games a year? That's pretty tough. And I mean, when you're talking about owners, Mike Brown is one of the cheapest owners in the NFL. So it could also be a cash problem. Like people don't think about like, oh, these owners are so rich, but it's like you got to put up money for in escrow for all of those contracts. You have to have it on you. Like you can't just be like,
Yeah.
yeah, eventually we'll come up with $140 million. So it is more cash up front than people think about, but I don't know if that's the issue. That's all speculation, obviously, but
Yeah, it could be multiple things, but I would tend to lean like you just said. He's one of the cheapest owners in the league, if not the cheapest. And I would imagine, knowing Jamar's personality, I bet he is asking for at least to match Jamar or Jefferson's. But I wouldn't be
yeah,
surprised if he's not asking for more. And I would imagine with as cheap as the owner is, he's not going to do that. And that's kind of
I don't think he
sad,
should do
honest.
that.
I mean, I don't know that he should. I don't know if it'd be wise for the team, but I don't know what you're going to do next year when you don't have either receiver. Now, I guess if you
You
decide,
pay
hey,
Higgins.
yeah, I guess
You
if you
go,
decide, hey, we can't get anything done with you, Jamar, because you want way too much money for us, we'll go pay Higgins slightly less, and he'll become our one, and we'll draft.
yeah. And they just drafted a guy this year, so they're planning for playing
But
without T. Higgins. The plan could just swap to playing without Jamar
in
Chase.
my opinion, if you lose Jamar Chase and Higgins is your one, I think you're taking a step back, and I think your Super Bowl window closes for a little bit because I, I mean, like,
It
I'm not saying
shrinks.
I'm not
I
saying
wouldn't
it
say
I'm not saying
closes.
it closes, but it definitely gets a lot smaller. Like this
Yeah.
year with Higgins and Jamar Chase, they're real contenders. If they kept Chase, drafted a new guy, I'd say they're still pretty good contenders, a little slightly less. But if they lose Chase and keep Higgins and draft a guy, I would say they've taken a decent step back just because of how explosive Chase has been when he plays.
It also depends because if you're giving up Chase next year, you still have him. So it depends what you get back in return. Like for example, Tyreek. It's like, well, we traded Tyreek. Well, what do we get back?
Yeah.
4 starters. Like if you can get 3 or 4 starters and you have the money to play with, maybe you don't take a step back. As far as the talent on the offensive side, you're obviously going to take a step back if you lose Jamar Chase. So that's a decision they'll have to make. Like I said, I'm with you guys. If you're going to pay him, like if they're not in our camp and they're like, no matter what happens next year, we're going to pay Jamar Chase. Just pay him. Just freaking give him the 40 million, the 39 million, and be done with it. I don't understand owners' thought processes. Because in my mind, they have no power. Like the player can sit out and they can not pay him, but it's like you're losing the player on the field. The player just doesn't play. I mean, they're losing money, but it's like Jamar Chase is going to go get money in his next contract wherever he goes. He's not Le'Veon Bell where he's already old and already kind of washed before he already sits out. Like most players that are having these huge deals can afford to sit 4 or 5 games and wait for the owner to be like, I need a guy on the field. I'm going to trade him.
Yeah. I mean, I would say the best case scenario, like you said, if he's asking for big time money, is to, like you said, do the Tyreek thing, trade him in the offseason, tag him, trade him, get what you can for him, and then just build with T. Higgins. Build
Yeah.
off of what draft capital you can get, and maybe just of having that extra space, maybe you can sign a good 2.
Yeah. All right. That's all we got for today. I think that was a pretty fun podcast. It was pretty interesting. Just kind of rambling. And I think I like that a little bit more than some of the other ones we've done where it felt super like bop, 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 bop. But enjoyed talking to you today, boys. Have a good night.
It was
I
a
got
good one.
Adios.
NCAA.
See you guys.
Me.